Well, good morning, church, and good morning, you online. It's great to be with you this morning. My name is David Miller. I am a retired pastor. We served all across the country for 36 years, and 8.5 years ago, we decided it was time to make a change and retire, and so we moved from Atlanta to be here in the Valley because we have a daughter, a son-in-law, and we have 4 grandkids. Actually, 2 of them are up there in the balcony right now because my wife and I have been taking care of 2 of them, half of them, while their mom and dad got a weekend away. So trust me, it's been an exciting weekend. I had the 2 little guys, they're 6 and soon to be 6, and then I get to speak this day. So it's great to be with you. Daniel came to me, we were meeting a month and a half or so ago, and he says, hey, I need to kind of be away on this particular weekend. Is there any way you could pinch hit for me? And I said, sure. And then I looked at the calendar and said, oh, we got the 2 grandkids this weekend. Oh, it's going to be exciting. And it has been exciting, but a good exciting. And I'm glad to be able to share a few thoughts from God's Word with you today. 8.5 years ago, we decided to come to Atlanta. But actually, we decided before that. We were in Atlanta. We'd been there almost 13 years. And it felt like it was time for God calling us to say, leave that season behind. And so a year before we actually came to the Valley, we bought our home up near Spring Valley, up near the campus of CMC Spring Valley, up on the mountain. In fact, there should be a picture, I think, coming up. So this is our mountain house. It was a great house. We loved it. We had an unobstructed view of Mount Sopris. It was gorgeous. It was quiet, it was peaceful. And that first year, we had a renter in it, and they were a great family. They were wonderful to the house. And I was in my office one day, and all of a sudden, I got this phone call from the renter, and he says, we have a problem. And I said, well, what's the problem? He said, the deck is falling off the house. I said, what? I said, we had the house inspected. So on. No, it's literally, and he was an engineer by trade. He says, literally falling off the house. So I called a contractor came in, and he shored up the deck. He braced it, and he put these cables in there and hung it, put it all together. And it was great, and the deck was fine. We could be out on it. So about a year or 2 later, we're back. We've moved in. We're at the house. And Kathy's moving furniture on the deck. And there's another picture of the deck. And you see in the picture, you see our grill, and you see some tomato plants. And you see that little square right there? Well, if you look at the deck carefully, you'll see there's a stump underneath that square. Now, what that really must have meant was at one point they built the deck around a tree. And the tree came up through the deck. But for some reason, the previous owners decided they didn't want the tree anymore, so they cut the tree off below the deck, and then they patched it with that little square. Everything was great until Kathy was moving the furniture on the deck one day, and she fell through the patch. Now, truth be told, she was okay. That was a good thing. But obviously, the foundation was just shot. The foundation, whether it's a deck or a house or a road or our spiritual life, it's critical, isn't it? It's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. And today I want us to look at a text from the New Testament, 1 Corinthians chapter 3. If you have your Bible or your tablet, you can turn to that. There'll be some of the passage up. We're looking at verses 5 through 17. Although I'm not going to read it, it's a super long passage. I'll let you read it maybe when you go home. But we're going to look at some of the truths that the Apostle Paul shares with us in this particular text. And because I believe that these truths apply to us individually, but also to us as a community. I think it fits no matter who you are, no matter whether or not you're kind of investigating the faith or whether or not you're, as Pastor Daniel would say, you're kicking the tires of the Christianity and you're just trying to check things out, or maybe you're a newcomer, maybe you're a new believer, maybe you're like me, you've been a follower of Jesus for many, many, many years. I think this particular text can speak to all of us because I think it has some lessons for how we can be built to last. So here's the first life lesson that I think we can draw from this text. Everything rests on the foundation. Let me give you a little background on this particular text. Paul is writing, the Apostle Paul, and the apostle basically means the sent one. But he wasn't always the sent one. He wasn't always an apostle. Earlier on, as we learn in the book of Acts, his name actually wasn't Paul, it was Saul. And at that point in his life, he was a Jew, and he was what's known as a Pharisee. He was a teacher and a keeper of the Jewish law. That's who he was. And he was that to his core. And what that meant was anyone who they believed weren't following the Jewish law, they had to go. And so he became a persecutor of those who were the followers of Jesus. Until he was on this road to Damascus, and he had this unbelievable experience where God came to him and spoke to him and transformed his life in the blink of an eye. And he went from being a persecutor of Jesus to a follower of Jesus. And then as he followed Jesus, his main mission was to those who were non-Jews, those who were the Gentiles. That's who his main mission became. And so he would go from city to city, church to church, and he would be teaching about Jesus and instructing how people should follow and to live following Jesus. And so in this particular text, he goes to Greece, to the city of Corinth, and he begins to teach in the church in Corinth. And this particular text is a letter that he wrote to them as instruction and guidance for how to follow Jesus. So that's the background. Listen to what he writes in the 10th verse of our text. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else building on it. But each one should build with care. Scholars believe that the Apostle Paul was in Corinth for about 18 months. Now, in the verses before this, in verse 6 and following, he says, I planted. In other words, I sowed the seed for following Jesus. I laid the foundation. And then he says, but Apollos, another follower of Jesus, he watered the seed. In other words, he added to it. But then a critical statement, he says, but God made it grow. The key is everything rests on the foundation. You know, as you look around the world and as you listen to people, the world will tell us that we build our life and we should build it on the foundation of things like success, image, careers, money, homes, cars, power, influence. But honestly, after living in the valley for 8.5 years, a lot of that doesn't seem to apply to many of the people that I meet. Here's what I have seen, many, not all, obviously, but I have seen over the last 8.5 years, many people build their life on the foundation of recreation and adventure. That's not true in other parts of the country. I didn't find that true in Atlanta. I didn't find that true in South Dakota when we were in South Dakota. I didn't find that true as much in Florida when we were there. I certainly didn't find that true when we were in Ohio. Ohio's my home state, so I can say that. But in the valley, a lot of what I see people focusing their life on are recreation and adventure. Now, let me just say, there's nothing wrong with recreation. There's nothing wrong with adventure. And in fact, you know, I kind of like it myself. I like going down a Black Diamond at Snowmass. I enjoy that. But if we build our life on that primarily, when the storms of life hit, friends, it's not going to go well. And Paul gives us some wise advice in this text. He says in verse 11, "For no one can lay a foundation other than one already laid, which is Jesus Christ." In other words, the foundation that's going to last, the foundation that's going to hold firm when we face the ups and the downs of life, which every single one of us face. We can't avoid the ups and downs. When we face them, the only foundation that's going to last is Jesus. Last week, excuse me, if you were with us last week, Pastor Daniel talked about how we need to move from being a fan of Jesus to a follower of Jesus. In other words, we need to come to that point where we recognize our sin, where we recognize that we're not perfect. When we recognize that we have multiple missteps in our life. When we recognize our need for Jesus. When we recognize that we put our faith and trust in him. That becomes the foundation of our life. And when we do that, there is forgiveness from the past, strength for the present, and hope for the future. Did you get that? When we make Jesus the foundation of our life, there's forgiveness for the past, there's strength for the present, and there's hope for the future. You know, those folks who know me know that I'm really pragmatic. You know, in all my years of ministry, I wanted to know what worked. And it didn't matter where I got the insights. I didn't really care. And truth be told, I was a Presbyterian pastor. Okay? You know what they call us, don't you? The frozen chosen. I mean, you know, but I didn't really care. Whatever worked, that's what we did. Whatever brought people to Jesus, that's what we did. Whatever helped people grow and develop and become deeper in their relationship with Christ, that's what we did, because I'm pragmatic. But you know, one of the things I love about Pastor Daniel, he helps me branch out beyond my pragmatism. And he helps me think bigger and broader. And he helps me see a God that is bigger than my pragmatism. But still, my pragmatism, it's there. And so one of the questions I want to ask myself, and I'll ask you this morning, is how, if we're to build this foundation on Jesus, how do we build a foundation on Jesus? How do you do that? Well, let me just say, there's no silver bullet. There's no one way. But let me give you a couple ideas how I'm doing it right now in my life. One way that I'm building that foundation is that I have a couple apps on my iPad and my phone that I use on a daily basis, because I absolutely am committed and believe that if we are going to have a foundation with Jesus, we have to have a daily time with the Lord. A time of prayer, a time of studying and listening to God's word. And let me just say, I know that's not easy, because I know lots of other things get in the way. But one of the ways that I have learned right now in my life is I've got a couple apps on my iPad and my phone that help me with that. One is called Pray As You Go. I think it's designed to be able to pray as you're commuting back and forth to work. I sit in my study and I turn it on and I can read it, so you can listen to it and read it at the same time. There's a proverb or a psalm read, and then there's a person that shares some insights, all right? And then there's music, and then there's quiet time, and there's some questions to say, think about this as you focus, because maybe you're different than me. Prayer is not an easy thing for me. You know, you think after you were a pastor for 36 years, prayer would be like nothing to it. But it's not for me. And the reason it's not for me is my mind is going all different directions. And I get so distracted, it's very hard for me to focus in on praying and having that quiet time with the Lord. But this app helps me. Another app that helps me is called The Bible with Nikki and Pippa Gumbel. It's this British couple. They're Anglican, so they're a little different as far as my background. That's okay. And then you get to hear a psalm or a proverb. You get to hear a New Testament lesson. You get to hear an Old Testament lesson and some commentary. It's just really good to focus and it only takes like 13 minutes to focus just those few minutes. That's one way that personally right now is helping me to build that foundation. I know that some of you, and if you've noticed, we had a baptism in this service. We had 3 baptisms in the last service. You know, I don't know if you all realize the number of baptisms that we've been having. That is not like the norm of the church. I mean, God is doing something really special and exciting here. And I know there are a number of new folks that have just come to faith or come back to faith. You know, we need to continue to help those folks build that foundation that's firm with Jesus. And one way you can do that, if you're in that sort of investigatory stage, if you're in that new to faith stage, is next week, Pastor Dan starts a class called Starting Point. During this service, you'd have to come to the first service, but during this service, be a great place to ask questions that you may have always wanted to ask, to get some clarification on some things that you're not uncertain about. Check it out if you're kind of new to the faith or just investigating. During the announcements, Pastor Jake talked about the community groups. Here at the Orchard, we're committed to community groups. It's a great way to help build that foundation for you. And if you want to get involved in one, check out Pastor Jake and let him help you with that. My wife and I, Kathy and I, started coming to the noon prayer service here in the room. And I realized, you know, we can do that because we're retired. Many of you can't because you still work. Which is good. That's all good. But if you're free, it's really a great time. You meet some great people. You have some time. It's very short. It's like a half an hour. You know, that's another way to build that foundation with Jesus. Another way is worship. You know, being here on Sunday mornings. And I just want to encourage you, when you're in town, be in worship on Sunday. Now, and for those of you who are parents, I want to encourage you to help build the foundation of your kids with our children's ministry with Pastor Mandy and with our youth ministry with Vinny, Pastor Vinny. I am so committed. Kathy and I, in all of our years of ministry, realized that the kids are the foundation for the future. And you've got to build on that. I can remember a brief story. We were in South Dakota for 12 years. And 6 months after I got there, they kind of wanted to know what I thought, you know, kind of like, where should we go? And I said to them, the very first thing we need is a youth director for our children. We had a children's director, but we didn't have a youth director. We didn't have a youth pastor. And you know what the comment was? Oh, we can't afford one. And you know what my comment was? We cannot afford not to have one. You just can't afford not to have one. So I want to encourage you as parents, you know, get your kids involved with Mandy and Vinny. It's critical. There are ample opportunities to build the foundation here at the Orchard. Here's the key. You got to take time and make time to do it. No one else can do it but you. So the first lesson to build to last is that it all starts with the foundation. The second lesson is this: choose the right building material. We have to choose the right building material. So 2 years ago, we were living up on the mountain. Our kids were down in Glenwood. They were in a small home that they bought like 10, 12 years ago when they were just the two of them, and now they're 4 kids and 2 adults in this small house. So they were looking for a house, and they found a house literally 2 doors down on the same street. Neighbors said, we're moving, we'll sell it to you. Great. So they bought that house, and as soon as they decided to buy that house, Kathy, my wife, says to me, I want to move off the mountain. I want to get into town. Let's buy their house. I know, I'm looking at some of your faces like, what? You know, here's the deal. It would not work for everyone to live 2 doors down from their kids and grandkids. It just wouldn't work for everybody. But it works really well for us. And so we bought their house, and you're going to see a picture of it, hopefully. There's our house downtown Glenwood. Now if you look carefully, you can only see part of it. The deck goes 3/4 of the way around the house. Okay. This house was built in the early 70s. And as a realtor would say to me, it has good bones. You know what that means, don't you? It means there's a lot of work yet to be done. That's what it means. And that's no commentary on our kids, because they were busy working and raising family and all that kind of thing. So last summer, we noticed some of the boards on the deck were lifting up. And so I brought in a contractor and I said, okay, let's replace the boards. Well, when he started pulling up the boards, he realized the joists were all rotten. And what that meant was the whole deck, 3/4 of the way around to the house, including that nice long staircase, had to be replaced. And then, of course, the deck was partially connected to the fence. And the fence went like this. It was real wobbly, and so then the fence had to be replaced. So then the question becomes, what kind of material are we going to use to rebuild the deck and the fence? You can have wood, or you can have Trex. Now, let me just say, there's no one size that fits all. What's right material-wise for one person is not necessarily right for the other person. But for us, what was right was the Trex. Because I'm not interested in doing the decking again, ever. Ever. You got to choose the right material for you. No matter what you're building. The question is, what material are you going to use to build? Listen to what Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 12 and 13. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. Notice there are different types of building materials here mentioned. One section of 3 is wood, hay, and straw. They're not the best building materials for long-lasting impact, are they? And sometimes I think the materials that we use in building, say, relationships are not necessarily the best building materials. Sometimes we use gossip, sometimes we use put down, sometimes we use criticism, sometimes we use passive aggressiveness. Doesn't build a very good foundation, does it? On the flip side, the gold, the silver, and the precious stones are durable and lasting. And if we are to build a life, if we are to build relationships, if we are to build a community of followers of Jesus with encouragement, with support, with care and with compassion, with a willingness to say, will you forgive me? With a willingness to admit our missteps. If we have the character traits and the building materials of integrity and authenticity, It's like building with gold, silver, and precious stones. So here's my question to you. What materials will you employ this week? And who will you build into and build up this week? Now, when I asked myself this question as I was preparing these thoughts, immediately there was a friend in Atlanta that came to my mind that has struggled with illness for some time, and I thought, he's the guy that I need to connect up with this week. And then my mind went to another person. A little bit about me. If I don't write them in my calendar, if I don't write them on the notes of my phone, that memory just flies away. Maybe you're not like that, but here's what I want to encourage you to do. I want to encourage you to write that person or those person's name down in some form, and then I want to encourage you to follow through this week, to connect up with them, to encourage them, to support them, to show compassion to them, to build into them, and to build them up. You want to build something that lasts? Choose the right materials. That brings me to my third and final lesson for building wisely, and that is this: build wisely. Build wisely. In the 10th verse of our text, it goes like this: each one should build with care. In other words, we should build wisely. It's great to have a solid foundation, and it's great to have the right kind of materials to build that solid foundation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to build successfully. Listen to what the words from Jesus were in Luke chapter 14, verse 28. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Wouldn't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you had enough money to complete it? Friends, there is a cost to build anything. There's a cost to build a deck. There's a cost to build a relationship. There's a cost to build a career. There's a cost to build a healthy family. There's a cost to build your spiritual life. There's a cost to build the community of followers of Jesus. There is a cost to build everything. This past weekend, Kathy and I had the privilege to go to Seattle to visit our son, our daughter-in-law, and 2 grandkids in Seattle. And I know you're probably thinking, well, did it rain? I had somebody come up to me after the first service and say, Seattle is not really rain. We lived in Alaska. That's rain. We had a great time. The sun showed most of the time. It was sunny most of the time. It rained a little bit at night. We got to see 2 soccer games and a football game. We got to go to church with them. It was a great time. Now, both of our kids work, and they're raising their kids, and they're got all these activities. So they're really busy. And we were there from like Thursday to Tuesday, and so we rented a car. And here's something I've learned over the years. No one washes a rental car. Doesn't matter how dirty you get it. You're not going to wash it. And the reason is you don't own it. There's no commitment to it. If we're going to build wisely, it requires a commitment of time and energy and resources. And here at the Orchard, we want to help those who are here and those who are online. We want to help all of us to build that strong, firm, consistent foundation on Jesus. It's not about working harder at it. It's about trusting and believing in Jesus and committing our life to him and then watching what God's going to do. But that commitment is also going to take some sacrifice. There's a cost. If you're new to the Orchard, if you're just investigating the Christian faith, this is an opportunity for you to come and just question and learn and get a feel for who Jesus is. And that may be the first step that you need to take. And if you're not ready to make that commitment to Christ, that's okay. Keep coming back, keep searching, keep asking questions. If you have any questions, I'll be down here in the front. Pastor Jake and the other pastors will be over here. Pastor David's back there. Come and talk to us. We'd love to talk to you. But let me talk just for a minute for those of us who have taken that first step of commitment and following Jesus, of recognized our sin and repent of it. Let me talk to those of us in that playing field. It's going to take some commitment and sacrifice for all of us. If we're going to build our own individual life and our own individual walk with Christ, if we're going to build this community of fellow believers, which God is doing an amazing thing, it's going to take some sacrifice for us. That sacrifice might mean that when on a Sunday in January it dumps a foot of snow and you want to go skiing, the sacrifice may mean you need to skip that powder day and be here in fellowship with others. Or that sacrifice might mean that on some Sunday, instead of being in this part of the building, you're up there with the children, like I was with my wife 2 weeks ago teaching first, second, and third graders. Just as an aside, I told Mandy, I'm willing to help, but don't put me in charge up there. Maybe the sacrifice is missing a particular service here to be there, or with Vinny, with the youth. And maybe you need to come the service before or the service after. Or maybe that sacrifice is that you don't get to sit in your favorite seat because there's so many new people, they don't know that's your seat. Praise God, there's so many new people. Or maybe it means you need to park in the school lot like I did this morning and walk across our parking lot so there's a parking spot for someone new. Parking's an issue. Or maybe down the road it'll mean you need to change and sacrifice your time of when you come to worship, because there's no seat for new people and you need to fill up a seat for somebody else. What I want to say to you is this: the challenges that we are facing at the Orchard are blessings. They're the kind of problems and challenges you want. But it still means there are going to be some sacrifices that need to be made. I came across a book this week written by a retired pastor and author named Eugene Peterson. It's a book called, and it's titled, A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. And Peterson uses the book of Psalms to kind of direct and guide the reader into how you get to become a deeper relationship with Jesus, a deeper faith through prayer and worship and service. If we are to build our relationship with Jesus, and if we are to build the fellowship of the believers here at the Orchard, it will take a community being committed together. And that means time and energy and resources. It will take a long obedience in the same direction. The band's going to play our final song here in a minute. when they're playing, I want to encourage you to go to one of the communion stations to grab the little communion cup and bread. And I want to encourage you to take that communion and take a few moments to just sort of settle your mind and your heart and refocus and reflect. And possibly commit or recommit to building something in your life through the foundation of Jesus that will last. Because you see, that's exactly what Jesus did. And that's what we celebrate in communion. He gave his life for you and for me and for all, so that we might have life more abundant. His body was willing to be broken. That's what the bread represents. His blood was shed. That's what the juice represents. But in essence, it represents the sacrifice that Jesus has made on your behalf and on my behalf. And lest we ever take that lightly, let us be reminded of the gift that it is. For you see, Jesus set the scene for a long obedience in the same direction. Let me encourage you to do the same and build wisely.